Now we want to show you that President Biden, consistent with his physician's conclusion that he's in completely great health, that President Biden has since then he's improved. He has improved, and he's doing better. And we should really congratulate him in the we're going to look now at, I think it's today or yesterday, and just notice the improvement. I want you to see the improvement that our president has made. Little Joey is doing well. He really is. He's improving with all the help that he gets. Ah, yes. We'll have him in a minute. He, this, of course, was instead of going to Ukraine, he decided to go to Poland and instead of going to Ohio, and particularly East Palestine, he decided to go to Ukraine. And we got to find the right picture. Oh, here it is. There we go. Notice? Did you notice that? I want you to see that because he only falls twice here. Gets himself right up. Can we play that again? We want people to see his improvement. Notice, this is yesterday. He's walking up. Little stumble, but he's okay. Now, the other one was much worse. I mean, the other one was the other one was 3, if I recall correctly. But we'll get to that one at the end. I think you saw that one. That was his first stumble. Yeah, there's even a better picture. One and right up. Oh, Joe. They're doing wonders for you at the Happy Valley Nursing Home. They're doing wonders. You should keep going. I know it's connected to a prison, but that's the way it is when you steal all that money. Well, Joe Biden, as you know, decided that it was much more important for him to go to Poland and Ukraine than to deal with the now, 3 weeks? Almost 3 weeks? 3-week-old problem in East Palestine, America. That's the country he's theoretically the president of. And I don't know, he might have sent out some kind of a note or tweet today or yesterday. But up until now, not only did he not go there, as any other American president would have, he's never even mentioned it. Like, I'm sorry, or not only that, but his administration has turned down 2 requests for FEMA assistance from the governor and I believe from the mayor. I don't ever recall being turned down for FEMA assistance, ever. I don't know what the basis would be for turning them down for FEMA assistance. But in addition to that, Mayor Pipsqueak, he hasn't gone there either. That's weeks and weeks and weeks. He's waiting. Well, he's saying he's waiting for things to calm down. It's actually more like he's waiting for everybody to die because there's now rumors that he may be coming tomorrow. Really, pretty much all the damage has been done, Pipsqueak. So you might as well just stay where the hell you are and do your paternity leave or maternity leave, or if I have it wrong, correct me, okay? Whatever kind of leave we call this, okay? But the fact is, you didn't do much. You didn't do much for us when cargo was being hoarded and not moved around, and people were starving. We had a supply chain problem of the greatest dimensions. You had to be called off vacation, paternity leave, I'm sorry, in order to deal with it. And it was actually better when you were away. And this, I don't have no idea what you're gonna do about this. The decisions have all been made already. Whatever long-term damage that will be done to East Palestine has already been done. We don't know for sure, and you don't know for sure. What we do know is this is not, as you said, something that happens 1,000 times a year. Train derailments, maybe. Massive releases of toxic chemicals? No, no, idiot. It doesn't happen that it doesn't happen that frequently. So we'll go over that and we'll go over the implications of it. But the most important implication of it is he doesn't know where he's the president. It seems like his interests are much greater with Ukraine than they are with the US. You might remember that the last 4 days of his vice presidency, 3 of them he spent in Ukraine. And I imagine that was to make sure that the substantial flow of money that was coming to him from Ukraine, which amounts to bare minimum 8 million, could be as much as 20, would continue as it did from China. Uh, the only thing he cares about is money, right? I mean, he never would have put his son in this business if he cared about his son, who was an addict from the time he was 17. You don't make an addict the bag man with a bunch of organized crime killers, unless you want him to become a degenerate addict, which is what he became. And I would think if you even had just a little bit of humanity left, just a little bit, you'd recognize your granddaughter? Huh? People like to say Joe's a nice guy. Stupid, but a nice guy. They said about you in the Senate all the time. You can't imagine how often you were described to me as the dumbest man in the Senate. And then when I got to know you, it was an understatement. But I never knew you were this crooked and this mean. You should really leave. The 25th Amendment really requires that you leave. You are not capable of carrying out the duties of president. You never had much of a brain, and whatever you have is rotting. And the conscience, my God, that left probably with the first 20 or 30 million that you took in bribes. So we're going to have a guest who lives not very far from the site and who is an investigative reporter of great accomplishment, who knows quite a bit about this. And we're going to talk to her about what happened in East Palestine. And we're going to talk to her about a few other things as they come up. Millie Weaver. You want me to move a little this way? Okay. All right.
Awesome. Well, I'm happy to be here on your show today, Rudy.
Well, it's great having you. It's great having you. So tell me from your point of view, since you're on top of this a lot more than most because it's done close to you. What are the long-term implications of this?
Well, I think that we are definitely going to have to worry about our water, our air, the food supply, how that has been affected by this burn off of this toxic chemical vinyl chloride. Now, what's crazy is initially I was very upset about the burn. A lot of people around here were upset, and we thought, well, this is something wrong. They did something wrong. This was not supposed to happen. And we still have to look into that to find out why they made the call they made. But one of the things I did was I actually reached out to my father, who actually worked as a regional manager for a very big railroad company. I'm not going to say the name because he asked me not to, but he worked for decades in the railroad industry. So I had him look at the manifest, look at the reports, go over it, and get an idea of to see if he saw any regulations that weren't being followed or if they did something out of protocol. And so what he said was that it looked like they had followed regulations pertaining to the spacing of the cars, and they have to make sure that certain cars aren't too close to the locomotive or, certain parts of the train, meaning the hazardous ones, and they can only have so many hazardous chemical tanks on a
They
train.
had 11, was it?
Right, about 10,
About 10.
right? And they had 150 total. So what they did was they did do the spacing, that was done correctly. Then we looked at the reports on how to respond to these situations. And what my dad said was that anytime they do a burn, it is a last ditch effort to solve the problem, meaning it's anything to do with the very end if you have nothing else to do. I guess that would be the question to ask these authorities if we were to try to ask for more information is was that really a last ditch effort? Was that the last final piece, so to speak? What they was going to happen was there was potential for a levee. So a levee is when the pressure inside the tank increases too much and it actually causes the tank to explode. Flattens out a mile radius, literally a square mile radius gets flattened out, and it can send half of that tank flying in the air like a rocket, landing on someone's house, landing wherever. It's a
Within a
very
mile? Within a mile?
Yes, within a mile, but it can go as far as a mile. Like, it's very devastating. It would have flattened things, but it also would have sprayed, chemical gas with the explosion all
Much
over.
more than the burn off did.
Well, it might have just spread a lot of that vinyl chloride, which is very hazardous and can be more hazardous even than the burn off chemicals to immediate human health. So, what they had to do was to prevent a levee from happening because the pressure release valve was malfunctioning on that tank. They had to put explosive charges underneath the tank and they had to puncture a hole in the bottom. And when they did that, the vinyl chloride, which when it's stored, it's a liquid, but when it's released and no longer under pressure, it becomes a gas. So they drained it out into a trench and they lit it on fire. And that was what they did with this burn off. If they hadn't lit it on fire, it it was possibly going to spread very quickly out into the surrounding area, homes, backyards. This happened right in the middle of a town, right? And that could have actually been very deadly. So they really, if you really did have this situation as a potential levee, then they did do what they needed to do.
Did that involve one car or all 10 cars?
So just the one car that had the vinyl chloride,
Only
that
one
is the
car?
one that had the pressure release valve malfunctioning. But according to the report, the one of the cars holding ethylene glycol, about 12 to 15,000 gallons of ethylene glycol, lost its entire load. So that's something that we need to watch out for because ethylene glycol is basically antifreeze.
And where did that go?
Into the floor, into the groundwater, into the streams. It just went into the environment. It lost its entire load. So if we're testing for something, we should also be testing for that ethylene glycol because ethylene glycol does have the ability to kill animals. And I mean, who knows? That might be why we're seeing some fish dying or some of the surrounding animals dying.
In the days after, there were a large number of fish that were reported dead, like
Mhm.
3,500.
Right. And the problem is so many hazardous chemicals have been released in this derailment that it's really hard to pinpoint exactly which of the poisonous toxic chemicals is
Right,
killing the
right,
fish.
right, right.
Like which one is it? And it's terrifying because, you know, I'm living about 30 miles away from where this happened. And I know myself and many of my neighbors and community around me, we're also concerned for our well water. We're concerned for the how this might have spread and traveled throughout the air when this big plume was traveling across the
Why
sky.
is the well water more a matter of concern than the actual city water?
That's a good question, and I think that the city water is a concern. I don't think that it's not. I know that they're saying it's not, but we don't know. I think that there needs to be more transparency on the test, what type of test they perform, because if they just performed a basic water test, only testing for certain things, then they didn't do all the tests that they needed to do because there are gas spectrometry tests, are a whole bunch of types of tests that you can do to test for certain types of chemical substances, and some toxic chemicals can't even be tested for. So I wouldn't trust it personally, but the well water, I think it's because each individual home's well water hasn't been tested, right? Theoretically.
Right. So they've
Right.
they've tested the city water in general, more or less. You
Right.
can't test all the city water; it's all over the city. So you test as a matter of example, and they haven't found anything as far as we know.
Right, because 'cause they're testing at the source, so the city water, so they're knowing what's going out is going to be a reflection of that, but each individual well, that's could be it could vary because different wells drill down into different aquifers,
Hmm.
so you don't know if your specific aquifer could be affected versus your neighbor might have drilled 100 feet deeper, and they might be in a totally different
It
aquifer.
could be coming from somewhere else.
Exactly.
Yeah. But how large an area does it potentially encompass?
That's the big question. I don't know. You have to look at some of the maps of how the water travels, and I think it might be a good idea to actually reach out to some people in the local
I
water
find it
district.
really amazing that this information is not available. We have about 30 miles from New York City. I think it's 30 miles. I've forgotten the exact number of miles. A now uh, nuclear facility that's being closed down called Indian Point. In fact, it used to be three. No, it's two, and it's being closed down. I think incorrectly, but for whatever. Uh, Governor Cuomo, who opposed it for years because it makes up about 30% of our electricity,
Right.
opposed it, and then eventually the lefties frightened the living daylights out of him, and he had to do it. Uh, but we used to review a plan for that every 6 months, and its risk to New York City was not in the first order or second, maybe even third,
Right.
because 30 miles is fair for that size facility. It was fairly um, long, and it would depend on how the wind was blowing.
Right.
So if the wind were blowing north, New York City would be scot free by and large if it blew north for a day. But northern New York would be in terrible shape. Uh, Vice versa. And we had these concentric circles. And within the concentric circles, they could pretty much predict the damage that would occur from death to no immediate injury to possibility of long term injury. Now, of course, this was developed probably based on a lot of the data required at 3 Mile Island and where they had, but there have been spills like this before with railroads. You would think they would have um, some kind of model like this. And do they know? I mean, did you ask your father if they keep good records of exactly what chemicals they have?
Yes, they are supposed to keep all of that on the manifest, so to speak. And there have been other derailments. You're right. Actually, there was one in Granitesville, South Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
And that one actually killed 9 people and injured 250
At
people.
the time of the
When it
derailment?
happened, yes, because it when it derailed, it lost a bunch of chlorine gas, and the chlorine gas got out, and it was right in the middle of a town, same situation, and it actually killed people in their sleep in their homes. So it's not the first time we've had
No, it's
derailments
not. It
like
is
this,
not. Doesn't happen 1,000 times
but the
a
reason
year, but it does happen. Right.
it does
And it
happen.
happens enough. The point is, it happens enough so that we should understand it. And I mean, we should know it. Now, New York City has tremendous resources. So you can put a lot of resources into studying something like that. But a lot of that information was also available from the federal government about nuclear power plants.
Mhm.
Um, what are the dangers? How far? What's the difference if the wind blows? When does it affect the ground? When does it affect the air?
Right.
Um, what's the risk of if you have a chance of affecting it? Is it better to affect it toward the water or toward the? And it was more effective to do it toward the water because the Hudson River is a very, very big river and it will dissipate it rather fast. Whereas if it were a smaller river, you might you might not want to do that.
Right,
Now,
yeah.
there are no good choices. It's not as if you want to do that, but the question is, do you want to do that as opposed to let it go out over? That would be mostly suburban and ex-urban territory. Here, a lot of it is a little bit of city, a little suburban, a little ex-urban, and farms.
Right.
If you look at the circle around uh, East Palestine, that's basically what we're talking about.
Right, you'll have,
And
like,
food supply.
cities, and then you have little towns, and you also have rural areas, and so some of these I've seen video out there, and you guys could see it too, where there's literally levees taking place with these massive, huge square mile explosions, but typically, like, from what I've seen, the videos of it happening are in rural areas and farmland, right?
Near.
No, they're just it's usually farmland areas that these type of things I've seen it happen.
Oh, I
I've
see.
never seen it happen in a populated town where the railroad tracks are right up against somebody's backyard. So I think that that could have been very, very horrible if that happened, and I think that's what the mayor of East Palestine was kind of alluding to and thanking the firefighters for, because firefighters' job was to try to keep the flames down as much as they could so that the pressure wouldn't rise inside of that
So
tank.
they were stuck with the almost impossible job of containing it as much as possible, even though it's intended not to be contained.
Right,
Instead of like working against the natural.
right. Because there was another train derailment that happened in 2012 in New Jersey, and that was a derailment where also it was carrying vinyl chloride. But what was different was all of those PRV valves were functioning properly. So the reason why this one was so different and so rare is you had a situation where it was malfunctioning, horrible toxic chemical, and the potential for a levee, so they were forced to burn it off, but the chemicals that they're burning it off now are very toxic, including dioxin, phosgene, really bad, nasty stuff that gets into the soil, the water, the air, everything.
What's the agency that would have the most expertise about this?
Well, the EPA is supposed to, right? They're supposed
Right.
to be the agency that would be doing all
Yeah.
these
Well, they kind of
tests.
got September 11 wrong.
Right. So
Yeah, very wrong.
yeah, I mean, we really just need a lot of scientists out there. We need to, I think, really crowdsource it. We need independent people going out there and doing this because that is what I think is going to give us the most honest idea of what's going on out there. I know a lot of people, they're so distrustful right now of the situation with the government that they're actually going and getting independent tests done on their own for their
Well,
wells.
that gets us to something totally unexplainable. Why the lack of not even interest, the almost insulting disregard. I mean, weeks have gone by. The president may have said something yesterday in Ukraine, may have, certainly hasn't said anything, leaves the United States, could have made a trip here very easily and gone off, actually leaves the United States, never comes here, never checks. Uh, the Secretary of Transportation makes a big show of it. He doesn't want to disturb things that are going on and this happens 1,000 times a year. Get there when he can.
Well, it doesn't happen 1,000 times a year. Those type of events, like we've seen in East Palestine, are actually really rare. The reason why they can say these derailments happen thousands of times is because uh they can count any type of a little slight derailment
Yeah,
as an
sure,
actual
sure.
derailment. Like my brother, who actually worked at the railroad as well, he derailed a train, a train car on accident just by slightly getting it off the track one time while working on it, and it just, it fell off the track. So they just come, they pick it up with a crane, they put it back on there, but that counts as a derailment,
Sure, sure. It happens with the
right?
subway system
But
too.
that's not comparable to what happened in East Palestine. So I think that they're trying to make it seem like it's not as big of a deal as it
Why?
is.
Do you have a good answer for why? And is there a political motive to this that I'm missing? Is there a subterranean plot that I'm missing? I mean,
I think there is. I think that they just frankly don't care. I think that the Biden administration cares more about going to Ukraine and giving Ukraine another $500 million. And you have to ask yourself, with Biden's dealings with Ukraine and all the suspicion around that, is there something in it for him? Is he being benefited in some way financially? Because when it comes down to actually helping the real American people who are in need, the Democrats fail every time. They
well, I
do.
guess they can't make any money on that.
They
Is
don't.
what I mean. Biden had a choice between he could go to a place where it would really help morale and help to attention for it, and for which you would have no chance of getting money. And we can't say he got money in Ukraine, but there's a good chance of it. He always did. I mean, the 14 times he went as vice president, which is an extraordinary amount of times, he made a fortune. I mean, there we know he made money.
Oftentimes, you see all these career politicians like Biden and others, right? Who they go into politics broke and then they come out multimillionaires. Whereas, that's questionable in itself. And I think the stark contrast with someone like President Trump is he already was a billionaire. He went into politics, didn't even want to take the paycheck that these politicians get. And he just wants to do it to actually make a difference. And that's why he actually showed up in East Palestine, Ohio, because he actually cares. And I think that's the really awkward contrast here is that Trump actually cares and they don't. And now he's making them look bad. So now they're trying to send out Pete Buttigieg last minute. Supposedly he's coming tomorrow,
Think he'll be able
right?
to find his way here?
I don't know.
Little Petey? You think so?
I think that he'll be dragging his feet
I'll
because
be
it's already
looking
been
for him.
weeks.
He theoretically is gonna come and see the mayor after I do. I was hoping maybe the mayor would ask me to stick around.
You know what I think's
Mayor's
pathetic?
quite a bit bigger than him.
Yeah, he
He's gonna be
is.
really looking down on little Petey.
He is, and he's blunt. He says it like it is. I love it.
Buttigieg is not. Buttigieg is a liar.
Mhm.
So he's used to like saying convenient lies. And this is gonna be very, very interesting talking to a guy that's just, like really
He'll call him,
straight. Yeah.
and that's how people in Ohio are. They're blunt. They call it like it is, and I think that's why they like Trump because that's really how
First
Trump
thing I'd
is.
ask him for is the list of the 1,000 times it happened this year, so I could look at them, study them, and learn something from them. Do you have that? You have that with you, little Petey?
Yeah.
And Mayor, so first off, thanks everyone for joining us on a very special evening. We're live outside East Palestine, Ohio, with very special guests, and we're gonna call her a friend of the show. We usually save that for people that have been on it more than once. However, Millie, with everything she's been helping us with, we're gonna give her that title now. Is that okay, Mayor?
It's okay because we're gonna have her on more than
We're
once.
gonna have her
No,
way more than once.
awesome. Woo!
So we're getting comments, Millie. First off, a lot of people go, Millie. We love having you on the show. A number of people are subscribers of yours or follow you elsewhere. One question we're getting, maybe for both of you, is there any reason to believe there is something nefarious behind this attack? Behind this derailment at this time? Anything that points to that possibility, or are we still now looking at an issue with American infrastructure?
I think that there might be something nefarious pertaining to just simply neglect, meaning in Salem, Ohio, they picked up security camera footage where underneath the axle of the car, there were flames caught on camera. So that means that 20 miles or so before this derailment, There were actual flames underneath the
So they
train.
should have been aware that this might be happening. And as they moved along, it got worse.
And the thing is my dad told me that they're along the train tracks, they actually have sensors. And the sensors are supposed to be picking up if there's any wild wheels or hunting going on, meaning like where the wheels are almost trying to go off of the rails. And that's supposed to all be sending a signal to the station there. So they should have been picking up on that. And so I think that that's one of the big unanswered questions in my mind is where are those reports? Let's see the readings of these sensor detectors. Apparently they're saying that it was caused because of one of the wheels. Okay, then let's see the report. Did you guys have notice well before this happened? Because this train was going like 60 miles an hour when it derailed. I mean, it's insane.
And they should have been they should have noticed the fires, which should have slowed them down, and they didn't.
Yes. So that could, if they can prove that, if they do discovery, I would think in court, if they can prove that, then that could put Norfolk Southern at liability.
Well, I think the point is it negligence? Is it gross negligence? Was it an intentional act? Don't think we have anything right now to say it's an intentional act. But I would say, given everything that's gone on, you can't rule it out until we rule it out. You know, it reminds me of Flight 800 years ago, for which there never was an answer. And it's never, and I participated in the recovery effort there. And people ask me, was it shot down or not? And what's the final answer? I just don't know. I just don't know. I can't tell you that it was, but I should be able to tell you that it wasn't. And I can't because they never were able to exclude it.
Right.
So, I mean, I think at this point, I think it looks like gross negligence, then terrible government inaction afterwards. I mean, it's impossible to ever have imagined that a president would just not pay attention to a city asking for help just because they fit into the people he's been. Remember, these are the people he's been attacking as demons for the last two. These are the MAGA people. These are the white races. These are the
the
well, I don't know if they're traditional Catholics who like the mass, you know, who are all terrorists. They're probably some of the parents that don't particularly like their children being mutilated without knowing about it.
Yep.
That fits into the Attorney General's group of terrorists. I mean, these are the people he loves to pick on. I mean, the people he hates. The way he talks about them is with hatred, not even. Remember that speech he gave where he looked like he was in hell? He had that red background, and that was all about how terrible the MAGA people were.
It looked like something out of a cartoon. It was like, is this real or is this an SNL skit? I mean, what is he doing looking like a supervillain and then demonizing people who love America?
But
very weird.
No, I mean, he's basically has said that, and does he have a term called ultra MAGA? Because I decided to swear in as an ultra MAGA when he said, yeah, ultra. You ultra want to make America great. I mean, like, it's really bad to want to make America great. That's really bad. We should want it to be a failure so it can be taken over by China.
So Lee writes, good to hear she'll be on more. I've followed her work for years. I remember her on previous YouTube channels. That's Millie Weaver. So Millie, before we let you go, and we call this the fastest hour on the internet because it just flies by. We're already down to our last 20-something minutes. But Millie, for those that don't follow you yet, how can they follow you? What's the best way to follow you before we let you go?
Okay, so you can follow more about me at millennialmillie.com, or you could also follow me on Millie Weaver on Twitter, or you could follow me at millie.locals or Millie Weaver on locals. So, and also Millennial Millie on YouTube. I'm kind of all over on these social medias because it's like whack-a-mole. They keep trying to shadow ban me or censor me. So
He's doing good work then.
Yeah, that tends to be the case. You know, one thing I do want to say though before I go, because this is key. The mainstream media is trying to demonize Trump for his visit in East Palestine. They're trying to claim that this derailment was his fault because of regulations that he changed.
Oh, yeah.
That
That
is factually false. The regulations that he changed would have not affected this train derailment
right. They
at
actually,
all.
the Times did point that out in the 18th paragraph.
Yeah.
After blaming him for 17 paragraphs.
Yeah. So it's all fake headlines. Even if those regulations were in place right now, it would not have changed anything with this train because it only pertained to trains containing and carrying hazardous flammable crude oils. And this train did not have any crude
Is
oils
there
on it.
anything they haven't blamed him for?
They blame him for everything, right?
Well, Millie, it's great. It's great to see you.
Thanks for having me
Good
on,
luck,
Rudy.
and you'll be on very, very
Yeah.
soon. And thank you for letting us use your beautiful studio. It really
Of
is.
course.
It really is. It really is lovely. And be careful. Keep watching the water and everything else. So I think that was about as good an explanation as we're going to get from someone. Very to the point. I think it very much lays out the issues. There's a lot more to be found out here. And again, there could be more to it. We just don't know. But I think we can speculate about it too much right. Okay. Ted,
Thanks for
take
joining
us to our next segment.
America's Mayor Live. A very busy evening. We're live in just outside East Palestine. And now, Mayor, we have another very special guest. We have with us Matt Ferris. Matt is an Ohio resident and former candidate for the city council in Columbus, Ohio. So those not familiar with Columbus,
A
it is, of course, home
Democrat,
to
a Democrat,
Ohio State University.
and well, I was going to say a Democrat stronghold. Right?
Unfortunately, Mayor, yes.
Right?
Unfortunately, yes. Yeah.
That's where you got to wait out the vote. When Ohio used to be really close.
Yep.
I remember a couple of races where you really had to wait for how much were they going to cheat. Oh, what was the vote going to be in Columbus?
Well, it was pretty close when we were there. I think I lost by 1,100 votes back in 2000, and it's been so long ago here, 2009, and lost by 1,100 votes, 0.4% back then. That was really our last great chance to get any sort of foothold in there, and it would have been the biggest municipal upset in the state of Ohio at the time.
So, believe it or not, in the 1970s, I sold coal to the Dayton Power and Light Company, which is not far from Columbus. Dayton was our biggest customer. The Dayton Power and Light Company was our biggest customer. And my coal company was in Lexington and Hazard, Kentucky. And I ran it in bankruptcy. And I really got to know that part of Ohio and Kentucky, coming over the river, begging them for more money, trying to get them to take more coal. And we finally got out of bankruptcy.
Well,
it was a way to learn Kentucky from Brooklyn. It was quite a thing. Hazard, Kentucky were our main mines.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, this is God's country for sure.
Yeah.
And you get a great segment with Millie. And I think that I would want to add to that. Well, a couple of things. First and foremost is when they talk about doing the testing, Mayor, testing for. If you're not testing for certain things, dioxide, which is the thing that scares me.
Right.
How do you tell everything safe and clean if you're not testing for it?
Are they?
To my knowledge, no. I have not seen anything that signals that they're doing that. A couple of days ago, said as much, questioned whether or not they're testing for it. If they are, they're not saying. And that concerns me. So that's one of the things. Now, dioxides are one of the most hazardous chemicals on planet Earth. And that was one of the side effects of burning the vinyl chloride with those dioxins. And that's also something that's found in Agent Orange. Now, whether it's the exact same dioxin or a class of dioxin, I'm not exactly certain.
Is there a good deal of knowledge of what happens to it when it's burned off?
Well, that's where it is. I think vinyl chloride in its actual state as vinyl chloride, is hazardous. But when you burn, it's where the so that's what I'm concerned with. What are they testing? Toxins? and
What have they tested it for
uh,
and determined that it's clear of?
yes,
And given a list of
right.
what the tests have been.
Right. My family and I, we live on a 43-acre farm about an hour south of here. We're about 65 miles southeast of East Palestine. And we have a well and we have a spring. And I know that when we first moved to the farm, we had to get a well test, but I wanted to do better than that. I wanted to see what kinds of impurities were in the spring, what kind of impurity. And I was shocked. I thought, just went and gave him the jar and he said, "Here, test my water." Right? They were going to do some sort of multi-spectrum test.
It'd be pretty darn pure.
And you have to say they do a baseline test for some of the what I would call low-hanging fruit, some of the more common impure. But if you really wanted to do a full spectrum, like test for whatever the heck could be in here, it was outrageous. I mean, it could couple $1,000s or more. And then it was, do they have the capability of testing for those kinds of impurities?
Right.
It was it's not that easy. So I think that even the residents of East Palestine that are going to be testing the well, and let's say that they're distrustful of government, which who wouldn't be, and they want to go test their well, I don't know what it would cost to actually do that kind of a test. I don't know money. I can't even imagine what it would be.
Now, how many of Palestine is 5,000 people? But this is a much bigger area we're talking about. How many of those people would have their own wells? Most of them?
I really don't know. It's a great question. I really don't know. I assume it's a fair amount of people. I really don't know. That's a great question.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, I agree with you and Millie. I wouldn't feel terribly comfortable, at least right now, maybe a year from now, but I would be comfortable with the city drinking water right now.
And it takes a while for that to seep on water. So anything that happens in the soil, it usually takes some time and rain, and those impurities get pushed down through the soil. And what's going on under the ground doesn't happen overnight. It takes a while. And so, maybe we'll find out in the spring. It's winter, so here recently it's not constant rain. So, maybe it takes 6 months or a year. We just don't know. So for them to sound the all clear, and as much as I want to talk about the mishandling of this from our esteemed president and Mayor Rudy, as I call him, then we also have to talk about the mishandling of all this from Governor DeWine. Which I think was pretty shameful as well. I'm not going to say I'm an expert on how much he's been around for. To me, he seems pretty missing from this whole equation. If you recall, one of the first press conferences, they had a reporter there that was asking some tough questions, and they right before the press conference, and they removed him. They arrested him. I don't know if you saw the footage of that.
No.
I think the hogtied the guy and took him out. And Attorney General was yesterday, the day before, dropped all the charges on him and said, "Hey, he had every right to be there." Well, no shit, Sherlock. Absolutely. So when you kind of start off the reporting in your first conference with a journalist being hogtied and removed from the Q&A and the press conference, not a very good start to your
well, he sure had, whether he's been here or not, he sure hasn't been a visible presence, nor did he fight very hard to turn down a FEMA, which is unheard of.
Right. Yeah,
I think if I overlapped with Bill Clinton for 7 years, I was never turned down for FEMA. Republican mayor, Democratic president, he never turned me down. There were times in which he and then Bush, who was there for a year, would give me FEMA before I asked for it. They would anticipate. FEMA would go to the press. FEMA theoretically keeps track of these. FEMA knew about this the moment it happened. The FEMA bureaucracy knew about this the moment it happened. What would normally happen is a good FEMA operation will let the president know before a governor or mayor calls. They'll let the chief of staff know, Mr. President, you can get a call from Governor DeWine. You're going to get a call from mayors. You're going to get a call from. I tell you what, let's do it. Let's just do it. Let's get it ready. I think that's what Trump was alluding to today when he said I had a very good relationship with FEMA and was very, very surprised how good they are because you can't believe how surprised he was how bad many agencies were. FEMA is one of the better ones in terms of
responsiveness,
because they're doing the kind of work that's God's work. They're doing not that they're right all the time, and what they do sometimes is wrong because it's complicated work. But they're not, as far as I remember, political. But this has to be political. It's just ridiculous to me that you would ignore this place with all the attention they give to other places. And this happens to be a Trump stronghold.
Well, 2 comments on that, Mr. Mayor. Is number one, if I were governor right now, or Millie were governor, or you were governor, would you not be more vocal than DeWine has been? I mean, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. I'd be screaming bloody murder out there to try to get some attention to this.
Would be asking for me to be committed.
That's exactly right. And so he's not
and
fighting.
I'd be proud of it.
He's just not fighting for the state. Like
I would be yelling, screaming on every television show imaginable.
Absolutely.
I'd have gone to Ukraine and interrupted his conference with a petition.
So why is that, Matt, Mayor, Millie? Why is it that DeWine seemed to be late to the show and not, be speaking up more?
Well, I want to see if he holds any stocks in any of this mutual with Norfolk Southern.
Well, I think we also have to remember, Millie, and that's a fair assessment. I think the other thing that we have to remember, and it wasn't that long ago, was the handling of COVID. Ohio was the model state. Okay, we're a red state. Even we have probably some of the last conservative Democrats in the country. Those are kind of an extinct species most places, but we actually have them here. And I mean, I did nothing for this state in COVID worth anything. We had Amy Acton, the woman that the head of the Department of Health. He kind of did it with a little bit of a smile. He did it with some dignity, but he locked everybody down. It was a terrible handling of this. So he's not really fighting for the citizens of Ohio. He really hasn't done that. So I don't know why we would expect to do him, to do it now. But I also think that he probably got told just to shut up and don't say too much. And I think he's following through.
Well, he generally has been on the opposite side of President Trump most of the time, hasn't he?
Absolutely.
And he basically, what I think he'd probably be insulted if we describe him this way, but he certainly belongs in the elitist Republican category.
He's done nothing his entire life.
Elitist would be protect the railroads.
And he's done nothing his entire life. This is a guy who's absolutely done nothing.
He's in the Senate, right?
He's done nothing his entire life. He was in the Senate. He was in state politics for a long time. He's literally been a career bureaucrat. He's done absolutely nothing in his life worth anything. And it's amazing how this guy just keeps coming back and keeps having second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth.
Well, the press probably thinks he's a bit of a turncoat Republican, right?
Yeah. And I think
that's one of the. That's one of the. I mean, that's why they do it. And a lot of those rhinos do it because they get, they don't get great treatment by the press, but they get better treatment than somebody who's true to the principles.
Well, they don't get it, right, Mayor? They keep trying to suck up to the press, thinking that they're.
No, they get it sometimes. They'll get an occasional.
You're right. They do get it.
They get an occasional editorial. They take it to sleep with them for 3 or 4 nights.
And Mr. Mayor, one of the things I wanted to comment on that you brought up earlier in the conversation about every 6 months you would have the protocols that would happen if certain tragedies happen. The nuclear plant was, compromised or whatever. They call these drills.
The main ones that we did often were tabletop exercises, where you didn't have to go out in the field and do it. But we would do those at least once or twice a month around a table, and you play out an emergency. Then we would 2 or 3 times a year go out in the field and do it.
So the question,
very helpful.
So the question I have is this: can anyone on his face say that the side effects of these chemicals?
I can't imagine.
I mean, aren't there people that have PhDs?
There gotta be books that have it all written out and tables.
Acting right now, like, gee shucks, I wonder what